Hi, Roy here, and welcome again to another edition of The White House Left. I am your host, Roy Garden, and we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today, as we always do in our podcast. But I want to start off the show with something that's very dear and personal to my heart. And it was just announced yesterday, on Friday, a day before I taped this podcast, that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is going to lock their doors and cease to exist. It was started by the Johnson administration, and Congress first funded the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. They provide the majority of the funding for all the PBS stations and national public radio stations, educational stations across the U.S. that operates from a lot of the university and college campuses. They pay for royalty for a lot of the music used on the FM stations and provide a lot of the funding for the programming that you see on your local PBS stations. They're done. They have nothing left in funding, and they're going to start shutting down. Why is this important? Trump calls it a leftist news organization. They don't report anything positive on the Trump administration and the Republican Party, so he don't like it. So he got all of his cronies in the Republican Party to defund it and move all the billions of dollars that went to the PBS stations to ICE and Homeland Security. Now, this is why it's personal to me. I got my journalism degree, folks, from the PBS station. A lot of that I helped get on the air in Riverton, Wyoming, Wyoming Public Broadcasting System. The local station's called KCWC. I helped, get the federal funding and stuff to get that station on the air. We basically just had a little cable operation when I went to school there, but it grew to become a very wonderful operating system across the state of Wyoming. It is the only PBS station, television station in the state of Wyoming, along with KCWC FM. They have they carry the NPR programming on that as well. The two sole representatives for the state of Wyoming, they're a sole representative as well as a state senator, voted right along party lines with the Trump administration to defund the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. Wyoming has this one station, and their two representatives said, I guess we don't need this, so let's defund it. These stations now have to figure out some way to stay on the air. A lot of the stations operate in rural areas, and the only place people can get any kind of information at all is from their local PBS station. And it's going to disappear. It breaks my heart, is what it does. I don't know what these stations are going to do. And for them to do what they did and put all the money in ICE, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in this podcast about what ICE is doing with all their billions of dollars. It breaks my heart. And I have absolutely no idea what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and how they're going to stay on the air. I really, really don't. I don't know. I guess I can say all I can say about it. But if you're out there and you love your PBS station, folks, you're going to have to start digging into your wallet somehow and get some funding to them. If you grew up with Mr. Rogers, if you grew up with Sesame Street, if you enjoyed the programs that they have on your PBS station, I watch it a lot, you need to think, what are these people going to do? They have to exist, especially in rural areas where there may be no television stations. This is like Wyoming. Wyoming's got 3 television stations in its entire state. They got a little over 450,000 people total residencies in the state of Wyoming. It's one of the least populated states in the lower 48. And for their two representatives to say, defund it, I don't know how people can stand to even re-elect those two. I really don't. So let's move on. I had to talk about that because it's personal to me. The July job reports released on Friday by the Labor Department shows a significant slowdown in job growth with only 73,000 jobs added. The figure is below economists' expectations and comes with downward revisions to May and June's job growth numbers. The unemployment rate remains at 4.2%. Key takeaways from the report: slower job growth. The U.S. added 73,000 jobs in July, significant less than the 110,000 jobs expected by the economists. Downward revisions. May and June's job growth numbers were revised with 258,000 fewer jobs added than initially reported. Unchanged unemployment. The unemployment rate remained at 4.2%. Impact on markets. The report caused a drop in the Treasury yields and a decline on the Standard & Poor's 500 index, according to Reuters. Potential concerns that you're going to see: the slowdown in job growth and revisions raise concerns about the strength of the U.S. economy, particularly with the ongoing trade tensions and the Federal Reserve's potential policy responses. Now, the Feds, of course, did not lower interest rate, which Trump wants. He doesn't he thinks he understands business, but this guy has filed more bankruptcies than you can blink your eye at. And he's doing all this stuff with tariffs, which he thinks is the answer to everybody's economic problems in the world. This is the whole thing with the economy is crazy. And instead of Trump owning up to it and say, okay, we got to do more to fix the economy, what does he do? Well, he is on Friday, he removed the head of the agency that produces the monthly job figures. Yeah. He decided, instead of saying, well, we got to do something to fix the economy, he called all those numbers a lie and fired this lady. On Friday, he removed the head of the agency that produces those monthly job figures. After reports showed hiring slowed in June, July, and August, he said that's bullcrap. It couldn't have. I'm the president. I've got everything working great. So on his post on his social media platform, Truth Social, he said that the figures were manipulated for political reasons and said that Erica McTarfer, I hope I pronounced her name correct, McIntarfer, yes, Erica. Let's just call her Erica. Anyway, he fired this lady. So sometimes I have troubles with names. I'm not going to admit it. But so instead of saying, owning up to everything, he blames it on Joe Biden, of course, again. Everything's Joe Biden's fault, although Trump's going on a year in office. It's still, everything's Biden's fault. So he provided no evidence for the charge that he said. I have directed my team to fire this Biden political appointee immediately, Trump said. She will be replaced with someone with much more competent and qualified. Again, one of his cronies he'll put in there who can just go ahead and go along with Trump and lie and cheat and just say, everything's rosy, ladies and gentlemen. Believe me, it's great. In my opinion, today's job numbers were rigged in order to make the Republicans and myself look bad. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer said on X that McIntyre was no longer leading the bureau. She was dismissed, and that William Wachowski, the deputy commissioner, would serve as the acting director. I support the president's decision to replace Biden's commissioner and ensure that the American people can trust in important and influential data coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, she said. Of course, she's going to say that because she's another Trump appointee. So, this is what Trump does. If people talk negative about it and it's not going to be correct, then I'm just going to get rid of the people that are putting those numbers out, so they'll put the numbers out that I want. And that's what Trump has been doing. Again, another authoritarian thing about what's happening to these United States. It's all got to be positive. It's all got to be what I say is the truth. And if you don't think so, then I'll just fire you. If you don't like it, I'll get rid of you. What I say is God's golden truth, and you got to believe it. So, the Federal Reserve, of course, kept the interest rates the same. And I'm going to talk about that next because there's something else going on here, too, with even the Federal Reserve. As you know, Trump does not like who's leading the Federal Reserve, and that's Jerome Powell. He does not like him because the guy he knows how the economy works. So they divided to keep the interest rate steady, as I just said, despite the criticism from Donald Trump. And there were a couple, two top officials that, maybe said they should lower them. But, the Federal Open Market Committee, the group that sets the overnight borrowing rate, voted 9-2 to stay on hold, which it's a majority. That's what this country is supposed to operate on, is the majority, not what one man says and how it's going to be. So they'll continue to set a range between 4.25% and 4.5%. The level sets the banks charge each other for overnight lending, but influences a slew of other rates across the economy. However, the decision did meet some opposition from Governors Michelle Bowman and Christopher Waller, both whom have advocated for the Fed to start easing and acknowledging that the inflation is now under control, although the statistics show that inflation is starting to creep up again because of the tariffs. And this was the first time since 1993 that multiple governors cast no votes on a rate decision. The post-meeting statement offered only a couple changes of how the committee views in economic conditions would work. So I could go on and on about this, but I want to talk to you about what's going on here. And that is that one of the governors that sits on the Federal Reserve Board has put in her resignation. And that is Andrea Kugler. She will resign her job next week, the Fed said in an announcement, which is going to give President Trump an early opportunity to appoint a favored candidate for potential leadership of the central bank. Now, why does this matter? Well, that is due to the fact that with Trump putting one of his own appointees in there, this will lead the way to get Jerome Powell replaced. And again, this is another attempt by Trump to control the entire government. I don't know who he's going to put in there. There's been some rumors floating around about who could possibly be putting in there, but she's stepping down next week. And she didn't really give a reason. She just said personal reasons. Now, I don't know. You can read between the lines what's going on here. Whether she was pressured to resign so Trump could put somebody else in there, I don't know. But, he's going to have somebody in there now that can shadow Powell and put more pressure on him to do what Trump wants him to do. While the GDP reports showed a slight increase for the second quarter, which Trump and his press secretary are beaming all over it, oh, look at the economy's coming around. It's great. It does show the administration's chaotic trade environment with his tariffs. And so therefore, you got to kind of read between the lines what's going on here. Not everything is rosy in Trump land like he likes to show. Other things are going on. He's intensified his trade war with Canada, which is day ahead of his deadline that he had this just a couple of days ago. He doesn't like that Canada wants to see Palestine as a free state, so he's going to raise the tariffs on them. So he's going to put a 35% tariff on all Canadian goods not covered by the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. If the two countries don't reach an agreement for him. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney previously said tariff negotiations with Washington has been constructive, but the talks may not conclude by the deadline that Trump wants to impose. He's also putting a huge tariff on Brazil. What does this mean to us? All of a whole, 85-90% of our coffee comes from Brazil. Well, you watch, for you who like to visit Starbucks, watch that old cup of Starbucks coffee maybe getting up to $8 because he's put in a huge tariff on Brazil to try to force them to come to some agreement for a trade agreement. You got to understand that Trump doesn't care because he's the president. And as the president, he gets everything for basically free. He sits in the White House, Mar-a-Lago, wherever he is, everything, since he's the president, he doesn't pay one dime. You, the taxpayers, pay for everything, including his meals, his security, his airplane flights. I mean, why should he care? What you and I have to pay for a cup of coffee. But it's going to get steep, folks. It is. So get ready for that. And I know that you don't care. He's putting tariffs on South Korea. It's going to go all over the place. So I don't know what we as American people can really do to pay for all that. But there you go. Other thing that's going on in the news, well, this guy. The United States Senate has confirmed President Donald Trump's controversial nominee for a prestigious and lifelong position as a federal appeals court judge. The nomination of Emma Bouvet has stoked criticism from both Trump's political opponents and perhaps most notably from the conservative legal establishment. Whistleblowers' documents provided to Congress implicate that this guy in the administration is a violation of a court order that prohibited the transfer of more than 100 Venezuelans to El Salvador's Secot prison. Bouvet is a President Donald Trump's nominee to the Court of Appeals, and the Senate Judiciary Committee voted on him. Like I said, this guy's been doing a lot of stuff that he's basically told the courts to go F themselves before he got this position. You remember that flight that was supposed to turn around that didn't happen? This is what this guy does. He is a very, very loyal Trump appointee. He was his one of his personal attorneys. And, people on both sides had things to say about him, but again, they all fall in line. They'll tell the American people, and then, they quietly all fall in line and vote. They like to, get their constituents out there and make them think that, they're unhappy with things and that. And then when they get back in the, Congress, they push that little button and vote yes. Whatever Trump wants, we'll do for him. But, they'll definitely, when they're talking to you at town hall meetings, they have a different tune. And, I get their newsletters too, from here in Florida about, hey, look how great things we're doing. We really care about you, the American people. We care about what's going on, blah, 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 blah. It's just all BS. And then they get back in Washington and do whatever they want to do. So you always got to read between the lines with these people. They'll, as typical politicians, and this is on both sides, just not Republicans, Democrats do it too. They send you out marketing stuff and try to tell you how things are beautiful and going on, that they're out there fighting for you, and then they get back into Congress and they always go along party lines. Nobody's got any guts. AOC and a few others do, but most of them don't. All right, let's move on. Okay, Maxwell is still in the news. She's trying to urge the Supreme Court to overturn her conviction of the convicted sex trafficking and close confidence of Jeffrey Epstein. She has urged the Supreme Court to take up her pending appeal and overturn her conviction, claiming that she was covered by an agreement Epstein made with federal authorities that shielded her from prosecution. Now, this is being reported by Access. The case is about what the government promised, not what Epstein did. Now, her attorneys have told the justices in a new brief that, she's serving that 20-year term in federal prisons, and she's been there since 2022 for carrying out a years-long scheme with Epstein to groom and sexually abuse teenage girls. She has recently had meetings with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, as you're all well aware of, and they're trying to make a deal. Now, what's going on here is Trump has not said anything that whether or not he is going to pardon her or commute her sentence. He hasn't said no. They're trying to find out to come to a common ground. Now, she said she's not even going to testify before Congress unless some kind of a deal is made, whether she's given immunity or something along those lines, so she can say what she's got to say. The problem with all of this, as we all know, is if you can believe anything Maxwell is going to say. How true is it? There is absolutely no way to verify any of her story. And again, this little secret meeting with Todd Blanche, her attorney, and herself, that they have not been transparent on that either. there has been not one word put out about what they discussed. It's all secret and classified. So, and Trump himself has made an eye-raising remark stating that he's never had the privilege to go to Epstein's island. He actually said that. Watch this clip.
That's such old history, very easy to explain, but I don't want to waste your time by explaining it. But for years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. He hired help, and I said, don't ever do that again. He stole people that worked for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again, and I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. I threw him out, and that was it. I'm glad I did, if you want to know the truth. And by the way, I never went to the island, and Bill Clinton went there supposedly 28 times. I never went to the island, but Larry Summers, I hear, went there. He was the head of Harvard. And many other people that are very big people. Nobody ever talks about them. I never had the privilege of going to his island. And I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island.
So those talks were never mentioned in the latest Supreme Court filing. President Trump built his legacy, as you well know, on part of the power of a deal, and surely he would agree that when the United States gives its word, it must stand by it. And Maxwell's attorneys, David Oscar Marcus, said in a statement. So again, they're trying to get her sentence commuted or totally done away with. So they're not only appealing to the Supreme Court, but to the president himself to recognize how profoundly unjust it is for it to have this scapegoat, which he says Maxwell is, for Epstein's crime, especially when the government promised she would not be prosecuted. Now, if he would consider giving Maxwell a pardon, Donald Trump said, nobody's approached me with it, which is, again, is BS. Of course they have, and nobody's asked me about it. It's in the news that the aspect of about right now would be inappropriate to talk about it. He has previously not ruled it out, of course, and so on it goes about this pardon that Maxwell's trying to get. It goes on and on and on. So, other thing that's going on with Trump in the news is it's been reported in the media just yesterday, and this was Bloomberg, that the FBI has in fact come up with documents that show that Trump's name has been redacted, along with other prominent high-profile people, on the Epstein files. Bloomberg has just released this yesterday, so it is true that Trump's name does appear on the Epstein files along with other prominent public figures. Now, before y'all go, aha, again, I'm got to be transparent here. Just because Trump's name is redacted along with these other high-profile figures, here's things you got to keep in mind. When this report first came out in 2022, Trump at that time was a private citizen. It is the FBI's policy to always redact people's names, especially when they're private citizens, to protect their privacies. Now, how are you going to get their name unredacted? Well, it's going to take a lot to do that. It's a lot of legal maneuvers. But when they launched this investigation, I said 2022. My apologies. It was 2006. So let's correct that, 2006. The reviewers appealed two Freedom of Information Acts, known as FOIA, exemptions to justify the redactions, according to the report. One that protects individuals against a clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, and the other one that protects against disclosures that could reasonably be expected to constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. The report from Bloomberg noted that there is nothing particularly exceptional about this because these standards have long been employed by the FBI when it comes to redacting FOI requests. So they both requested that their names not appear, even though it comes to high-profile public figures such as Trump. The revelations about Trump's name being redacted from the files came the same day the New York Times reported that Maxwell, Epstein's longtime accomplice, who is serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking charges, was transferred from a federal prison in Florida to a minimum security women's prison in Texas. Yeah, you didn't know that. yeah, she's not in Florida anymore. She's in a minimum security prison in Texas. DOJ's decision to not release the Epstein files ignited a firestorm just this past month, and the president has been struggling to contain all of this. So there you go. It's kind of funny that Trump's going through all this. Again, you got to understand, just because Trump's name is redacted, along with these other public figures, which is protecting their privacy, it does not, I have to say this clearly, it does not mean that any crime has been committed because their names are redacted. Their names appearing in the files does not mean that any crime has been committed. It does raise some questions, but again, it does not mean that they've done anything wrong, that any crime has been committed. So please, folks, understand that. It's obviously raising some eyebrows, but it doesn't mean they've done anything wrong just because you see a name in there. So you've got to keep that stuff in mind. Of course, the Congress is going to get in the thick of all this and trying to find out, take the redactions off and find out exactly what the files say about Donald Trump and some other high-profile figures. I reported in my last podcast that these talks with Maxwell, I think what they're trying to do is, get Trump's name off of there, but find out if there's any high-profile Democrats, say Clinton or somebody else that's on there, so they can use that ammunition to go after the Democrats. So like, I didn't do anything wrong, but look at all these other people that, went to Epstein's Island, including so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Or if there are Republicans on there and they're in the Senate or Congress now, Trump will basically, and I'm not saying he would do this, but, maybe say, we will cover up your names and make sure your name doesn't show up in the report. In turn, these are the favors that I want from you when it comes time to vote on such and such and such and such. That's one of the reasons I think that, the Department of Justice went down there to talk to Maxwell. The problem is can you believe anything Maxwell says to be the gospel truth at this point in time? She wants out of prison. She may do anything or say anything to get that. So I don't know, because they're not being transparent about it. So what are you gonna do? If you can't come up and say anything about what's going on, where are you going to go with it? All right, let's move on. Let's go to our top story for today. Now, this is something that I have got to talk to you about. Remember early in the top of the broadcast, I talked to you about how we have got things going on with Homeland Security and all of that money that was with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and all of that, and it's now disappeared. Well, here's what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. The Department of Homeland Security is now going to create $1 billion worth of new hiring to get more people to join ICE. And they launched a new U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement campaign to recruit brave and heroic Americans to join ICE as federal law enforcement agents and remove the worst of the worst criminal illegal aliens from America's street. Define the worst of the worst, because we all know right now the worst of the worst happens to be anybody and everybody that happens to be of brown skin that is walking the streets. And when you're trying to meet a 3,000 person a day quota to an immigration arrest, it's everybody and anything. And that's what's kind of sad about all this is a lot of people are being picked up that have committed no crime at all. They might be in the U.S. illegally. That does not mean they're criminals. As you know, with DACA and everything else from these past times, people from other countries are coming to the U.S. because they need work and they're not getting in their home country and they want to feed their families. Again, I'm going to give you another example. the last few years that is in the state of Wyoming, a lot of people from Mexico were coming to Wyoming to work because in, say, Jackson Hole, where I grew up, they pay pretty good wages. And a lot of these immigrants would be living over the hill in Victor, Idaho and stuff, and sometimes 5 or 6 people to a home. And they would get their wages and they would wire, except for what they really need to live on, every penny back to their families in Mexico so they could have food and stuff. Is that wrong? Because you want to feed your family? Again, this white privilege thing that we're starting to get towards here in the U.S., like if you're not white, you're not wanted here, is slowly creeping up. It's kind of sad. So as you can see some of these graphics, Trump is saying your country is calling you to serve in ICE. They're willing to pay up to $50,000 on a sign-on bonus to join ICE. They're going to, if you have a federal student loan, that will all be canceled if you join ICE. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute. If you join ICE, you're going to have your student loan canceled. But what the hell with the rest of us that you in the Congress has said, well, you all got to start paying for your student loan now, and then we're going to put interest on it, which started August 1st. And if you go in default, we're going to take your money, your payroll, your Social Security, whatever we got to do, you're going to pay us. But if you join ICE, hey, we'll cancel your student loan. We want you to go out there and arrest thousands of more immigrants on our behalf, and we're going to pay you pretty good to do it, folks. And they keep saying, like, criminals and the worst of the worst. If that was true, great. If that was true, that would be fantastic. If you're getting these deep, dirty criminals and immigrants and arresting them and deporting them, but you're not. You're arresting kids, families, women, and you're detaining them, all of them, and putting them in these places like Alligator, Alcatraz, and Florida, which is a swamp-infested, flooded area, and people have shown that on video. Our own congressional people went down there and showed that. So, if you stay to what you're saying, that would be great, but you're not. You're lying out of your freaking teeth, So that's what's so bad about all this is it's BS, You're not. If you're getting the worst and the worst, it maybe be 2% of all the people you're picking up. But when you're trying to pick up 3,000 people a day, you're taking everybody and anything, and then you're starting to recruit more people, including the Highway Patrol. And I'm going to get to that here in just a minute too. Anyway. So Christy Noman says, this is a defining moment in our nation's history. Your skills, your experience, and your courage have never been more essential. The trouble is these ICE people don't have any experience and skills. They're picking up anybody and everything, like U.S. Marshals, basically, and bounty hunters, and putting a badge on them, and they're going after people. And we must defend our homeland to support this effort, of course, as I told you about that great package that they're offering. 25% law enforcement availability pay leap for HSI special agents. Administrative is going on there. They're going to throw all sorts of money at you to do what they got to do. There you go. Your billions of dollars that was pulled from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and of course other things, educational agencies that he's shutting down and laying off thousands of people. All that money is going to ICE so they can hire thousands of more agents to get all the riff out of this United States of America. Basically, if you're not white, skin privilege, watch out. So that's basically what it's coming down to. And God help us all. It's kind of sad, but this is what we're getting. All right, moving on. Some other little sneaky stuff going on in the news today. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has found a new money pot to fund President Trump's Quadre-backed Air Force One project. That little jet that was given to him as a gift? Yeah, it's he's got some money now, so therefore he can go ahead and get this jet, you're seeing right here, outfitted into Air Force One. It's sitting in Texas, and after they've scanned it to make sure there's no bugs or anything on it from Qatar that gave them this jet, they'll be moving right along and getting it outfitted. So that's going to be the new Air Force One. Now, the Pentagon has transferred $934 million from a Sentinel, a $77.7 billion project dedicated to modernizing the United States ground-based nuclear missiles, to a fund that Hegseth is classified. Yep, can't talk about it. And according to an article from the New York Times, and Air Force officials said at least some of the funds will go towards renovating a Qatar-funded Boeing 747-8 to Trump's liking. And the Sentinel began in 2020, this project, and delays have pushed the project's cost to over $125 billion, so they're starting to kind of back off from that. A Pentagon estimate last year found the project's cost could grow to $160 billion. So the Defense Department revealed it had dipped into funds for the over-budgeted, behind-schedule project, but only said the money would go towards a classified project. That classified project, most people have said, is Trump's jet. The Defense Department moved $934 million into this project, and the jet, of course, as we all know, is set to become Air Force One. There's been so many questions, like the president, first and foremost, is not supposed to accept private gifts, especially in this amount. This is a multi-million dollar aircraft, but he did it anyway. Again, as with everybody in the Trump administration, they just thumb their nose at whatever and say, we're going to do whatever the hell we want, and nobody's going to tell us different. And so there you go. They're going to fix that jet up, and it's going to become Air Force One. And then Trump says when he gets out of office, he's going to take that little jet with him back to Mar-a-Lago. It's going to be his own personal jet, all rolled into the Trump library to make it, in his opinion, legal. So they said it probably cost over $1 billion to get that jet retrofitted, because you got to put all the security devices on it. It's room for a Secret Service. You got to put the military apparatus on it, which a lot of stuff is classified, which it should be for Air Force One, how it flies, what's on it, what it does. And Trump's going to put all of these golden stuff in there that make it comfortable for him to live in. So I don't know. It bothers me, the things that happens with this stuff. And as much as we would like to, see more transparency from the Trump administration of what he's doing with this aircraft and what it's going to become, for Hegseth to say it's classified, again, they're trying to pull all the negativity of anything that's controversial away from Donald Trump and just do the great things that he can be remembered for, like the terrorists and things. So I really don't like to badger so much on Trump. I really don't. But I have critical thinking skills, and I have been on this planet long enough to, when I see stuff that's shady and when I see stuff that needs to be talked about, whether they're Democrat or Republican, I like to bring it out. But this guy, he just, I don't know. It just scares the hell out of me, some of the stuff that he has been doing. Now, another thing that's going on in the news is debt creditors are on the prowl for federal officials, and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, well, she owes $326,370.50 in the aftermath of her failed 2022 congressional campaign, and she has paid back almost nothing, a little bit, but almost nothing on that debt. And now she's got creditors coming after her. A campaign disclosure that has been filed with the Federal Election Commission, which she's required to do with their campaign committee, Caroline for Congress, didn't raise any money during April, May, and June of this year to pay off that debt, and they are coming after her. The majority of the debt is a result of accepting illegal campaign contributions that exceeded federal limits, the bulk of which she has not yet returned, reported Open Secrets, which, a lot of people go on to find out what our congressional people are doing. And, the campaign committee reported in June that it had spent the illicit funds for a long time ago and currently had no cash on hand to pay off the debt. Some of the individuals owed refunds, including former New Hampshire Governor Craig Benson, as well as the late New Hampshire Senate Majority Leader Robert Clegg Jr. Caroline for Congress also owes more than $46,000 to Missouri-based consultant Axiom Strategies, $41,000 to Missouri-based polling firm Remington Research Group, and she owes $13,000 to Washington-based fundraising firm Fundraising Incorporated. Other donors, however, did scrape by before the committee stopped dishing out refunds. They conveniently included, of course, Levitt's mom and dad. So, there you go. Now, Caroline Levitt, as a White House press secretary, of course, went on to talk about how, you all out there need to repay those student loans and interest rates are starting, and, other people should not be responsible for your debts, and you need to do what's right. But as far as her Caroline Levitt for Congress money and all those thousands of dollars, well, that's another story. We won't talk about that. No. That's okay. Never mind. Nope. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But, she'll get on there and talk about student loans and people need to repay all those. But her own debts, the hell with you. I don't need to do that. I don't have any money. Well, do you think students have any money? Or is that's different, huh? Because Trump ordered that. Speaking of Donald Trump, this guy also, he did another wild and crazy thing. Our illustrious President Donald Trump. He signed recently an executive order this past week directing states to criminalize, I'm going to use this word again, criminalize unhoused people and institutionalize those same people that may have mental health disabilities, substance abuse, and mental disorders. The order titled Ending Crime and Disorder on American Streets directs the Justice Department to expand indefinite forced treatment for people with mental health disabilities or substance use disorder and those living on the streets who cannot care for themselves. The order also purports to eliminate federal funding for evidence-based programs like harm reduction and Housing First that saves lives and directs federal funds towards cities and states that criminalize substance use disorder, punish people for sleeping outdoors, or enforce other laws targeting unhoused people. The order also calls for sweeping federal data collection on unhoused people with those with mental health disabilities, raising serious concerns about the surveillance, privacy, and how such data could be used to justify further criminalization. Instead of funding services or support, the administration is prioritizing profiling and control. The Civil Liberties Union, which we all are familiar with, says this is a scary procedure, and you got to be very, very careful about this. From the so-called big, beautiful bill that will strip health care from millions to this dangerous executive order, every action this administration takes displays remarkable disdain for the rights and dignity of vulnerable people. Pushing people into locked institutions and forcing treatment won't solve homelessness or support people with disabilities. The exact opposite is true. Institutions are dangerous and deadly, and forced treatment doesn't work. But Donald Trump thinks it does. We need safe, decent, and affordable housing, as well as equal access to medical care and voluntary, community-based mental health and evidence-based substances use treatment from trusted providers. But instead of investing in these proven solutions, President Trump is blaming individuals for systematic failures and doubling down on policies that punish people with nowhere else to go, all after signing a law that disseminates Medicaid, the number one payer for addiction and mental health services. Homelessness is a policy failure, weaponizing federal funding to fuel cruel and ineffective approaches to homelessness. It just won't solve this crisis. So to summarize all this, we see a lot of homeless people on the streets. So they basically want to get all those homeless people off the streets. And they're going to use all this now as a new law with excuses that if you see somebody that's homeless, they immediately must have a mental disorder, they've got addiction to drugs, or they're alcoholics. So get them off the streets and put them in institutions where they were going to receive no help at all. We all know how these institutions work. They're going to be overwhelmed, understaffed, just like the detention centers and the immigration detention camps that have opened up. They're just going to basically rot away. We want to lock them up and get them out of here is what they want to do. And the key word here is mental disorder. Now, a lot of people in the LGBTQ community are also kind of scared about this. A lot of them not homeless, but, will this carry over to them? Let's say somebody is living out of their car. They're homeless because they don't have any employment opportunities. They got laid off, or they can't pay their rent because rent's now going up to $3,000 a month. Who the hell has that kind of money to, even with a working couple and they have kids, maybe they got outpriced out of their apartment and they have nowhere to go. So they have a mental disorder now, huh? So you can see how this thing is scary. I'm all in favor of seeing that these people who are homeless get help, but just to lock them up in an institution, what the hell's wrong with this country? That's not how you take care of things, ladies and gentlemen. So, it's scary. And another thing that's going on, speaking of detention camps, the Trump administration is seeking to end an immigration policy cornerstone that since the 1990s has offered protections to children, migrants, in federal custody. A move that will be challenged by advocates, according to a court filing Thursday. The protection in place, known as the Forced Settlement Agreement, largely limits to 72 hours the amount of time that a child migrant traveling alone or with family and detained by the U.S. Border Patrol, ICE. They also ensure that children are kept in a safe and sanitary condition. Government attorneys call the Flores Agreement an intrusive regime that has fossilized federal immigration policies. In a motion filed Thursday afternoon, they contend that the agreement is no longer necessary after Congress passed legislation and government agencies enforce policies that also implement standards and regulations called in the agreement. The Republican Party passed that. You know what that relates to. They also blame the agreement for increasing the number of migrant children entering the country over the past 3 decades. The FSA itself has changed the immigration landscape by removing some of the distinctives for families to enter the U.S. unlawfully. So they said unlawfully family migration barely existed in 1997, they said. Now, we're going to talk about this for a minute. Why is this all coming up in the news? Inspectors, and especially those in the Democratic Party who, by grace, like here in Florida with Alligator Alcatraz, got in and looked at these conditions. There have been, I'm not saying Alligator Alcatraz, but there has been things seen like children wearing soiled underwear that haven't been washed and put on these kids. The guards have been giving kids unsanitary clothing. They have been put in beds that haven't been changed in several weeks. Some of them don't have shoes on. And so this act that was in place protected these kids because in 72 hours, they got to make changes or get them out of there. But the Trump administration and all this mass thing with deportation of illegal immigrants, kids or no kids, they don't care. That's not our problem. They shouldn't have been here in the first place. That's their problem, not ours. What are we supposed to do? They don't want any rules and regulations. We are turning into a 1939 Germany is what's happening with a lot of these immigrants. They don't want any rules or regulations. They just want to pay people a lot of money to get these people cleaned up. This is all Project 2025, folks. Plain and simple. That's what it is. So it's sad, but that's what we have come up to. And speaking of immigration, as I'm starting to wrap up this podcast, I know it's been kind of a depressing podcast, but this is just what's happened this past week, and I'm just reporting it. It's all in the news. I'm not making this crap up. Read it for yourself. So, an 18-year-old U.S. citizen who was detained by Border Patrol and the Florida Highway Patrol. Here in Florida, I always have a Florida story, and that's what I'm going to wrap up here with. During a traffic stop on Singer Island, this 18-year-old that was arrested is speaking out about his experience, claiming he was detained due to being Hispanic. He goes, I don't know, it hurts me. Hearing them saying that I have no rights here because I look like, Hispanic, they had a huge problem with this person, so they said, and they threw him on the ground. And this story has made national news. Take a look.
Wait, that's not how you arrest me. On the ground.
This was the moment Border Patrol and Florida Highway Patrol officers detained a U.S. citizen while conducting immigration enforcement. Kenny Linez, an 18-year-old high school senior, was on his way to work as a landscaper with 2 other co-workers and his mother, who was driving.
I got rights to talk, bro.
You got no right here.
I do.
Illegal, brother. Get up. I was born and raised here.
As a U.S. citizen, you hear that from an authority figure. What goes through your heart, through your mind?
I don't know, like, it hurts me hearing them saying that I have no rights here because I look like Hispanic.
The video comes as Florida will deputize more than 1,800 additional law enforcement officers to conduct immigration operations as part of a statewide crackdown.
No resiste, mira, no resiste.
They were pulled over for having too many people sitting on the front seat of the car. 2 passengers were undocumented. Officers deployed a taser.
What am I doing? Hey, Kevin!
We're not resisting, we're not committing any crime to, run away.
Linez's phone keeps rolling after he is detained, capturing this exchange between the officers.
Starting to resist more now.
We're gonna end up shooting for you. Just remember, you can smell that too with a $30,000 bonus.
Laws are just, they're no longer being respected. They're no longer being upheld.
Mariana Blanco is a director of the Guatemala Maya Center, an advocacy group that opposes Florida's new crackdown.
Deputizing these agents so quickly is going to bring severe consequences.
So on May 2nd, Kenny, a high school senior, was on his way to work as a landscaper with his mother and 2 co-workers when they were pulled over for having too many passengers in the car. Now, we all know that, and if you followed the story, you can see what happened there. That's why they pulled him over in the first place. And that's a legitimate reason to pull him over. Too many passengers in the car. Kids, you need to fix this. But during the stop, officers began conducting immigration enforcement and detained several individuals. 2 of Kenny's passengers were reportedly undocumented, leaving officers deploy a taser on one person. A local girl battling leukemia at Orlando Hospital was also a part of the thing on this. And one of the officers, as you heard in that video, replied, "You have no rights." Wait, he goes, "You can't grab me like that. You can't grab me like that. Hey, put your effing head down. Get the ground. Wait, that's not how you arrest people," Kenny was trying to tell him. And the Florida Highway Patrolman said again, "Get on the ground. That's not how," and again, Ron DeSantis has just created a special Florida Highway Patrol task force, and he's putting them through training to specifically now focus on illegal immigrants. So these Florida Highway Patrolmen who used to just, run our state streets and the interstate for, speeding and things like that, now they're all looking for illegal immigrants. And the video, as you just saw there, is terrible. And you heard that one Highway Patrolman said, "Hey, I get a $30,000 bonus for doing this stuff." Just remember, you can smell that too, a $30,000 bonus. Yeah, one of them said as they laughed. The response has raised concern among immigration advocates in Florida who believe the expansion of local law enforcement role in immigration crackdowns contributed to the violent nature of the arrest. And you can't, you can see why. These cops going to get bonuses and lots of money if they just arrest people. And this kid, maybe they had too many people in the car, and they said he resisted arrest, which he didn't. He's 18 years old. He's a legal citizen, and he did finally get out. I mean, he's got a Florida driver's license and everything. He's a U.S. citizen. Birth certificate, he was here, but he was Hispanic, and so they profiled him. And it's kind of sad that something like that had to happen. But there you go. And that is my podcast for this week. Sad news all the way around. As you can see, things are starting to build up. and it's just going to get worse. So you need to be careful, and you need to talk to your elected officials. You need to see what's going on here. Like I said, I'm all in favor of immigration enforcement when it is dealing, as they said here, with violent criminals, people from other countries that came in here illegally that have, criminal histories. But when you start attacking and taking down and detaining U.S. citizens, women and children, and maybe people who are trying to get their U.S. citizenship, and you're picking them up right from those same offices and detaining them just because they have brown skin and they're not white privileged people, that's wrong, and that's what's going on. And now you're going to get more ICE agents just to basically wipe everybody off from the U.S. continent that isn't white and privileged. And that's what we're coming to here, folks. And you need to take a look and take a listen. All right? That's my podcast for this week. I'm Roy Garden. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Until next week, you try to have that good week. We'll see you next time.